Hi everyone, Quincy here, and welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be trying something a little bit different, and that is, how about we go about actually building a deck before testing it out, so that way I can walk through how I build decks, how I approach a new archetype, and maybe that'll help you in building your own creative deck someday. To get us started, I want to focus today's theme on Magikeys. So the Magikey archetype is recently revealed for coming out in the next set soon here in the TCG, but also it received a second wave of support in Burst of Destiny, so the newest set to release in the OCG. And we're focusing on this theme because this is a great theme that really hasn't been iterated on much, but still relies heavily in the casual environment. It's not going to be winning any mega tournaments anytime soon, but instead, it's a theme that has a lot of potential and a lot of room for some creative deck building, some cool tech choices. To get us started with an overview of the theme, the Magikey theme features summoning of all the major types, so each of the 4 colors is how I refer to it. So they have fusion monsters, such as Magikey Summon Dragon and Dravidvis. It has ritual monsters such as Magikey Cannon, Gar's Vet, and it has synchros, a single synchro at this point, and a single Xyz monster. Together, this archetype is all designed around being able to summon any type of monster, in addition to supporting non-effect monsters, marqueed by their normal monster, level 4 Magikey Skyblaster Clavis. So together we're going to be diving into this archetype and starting to build. So as you can see, we're starting from a blank slate. Let's get started. So wherever I start when I approach a new theme, such as the Magikeys, I always want to start by putting as many cards into the deck as possible, and then whittling it down to get to where I would like to be with a happy number. So for this case, let's start with just 3 of the major normal monster, which is Magikey Skyblaster Clavis. As you'll see, a lot of the support cards interact with him, and interact with non-effect monsters in particular, so it's important that we start with at least 3 copies of him. The other key main deck monster for the theme is Greater Magikey Maftal, and this effect monster offers a little bit of extra, so it can't be used as Synchro or Xyz summon except for summoning a Magikey monster. But while you control Magikey monster, you can reveal it from the hand, and then that lets you get an extra Magikey normal summon this turn. And then whenever it is normal summoned, you can special summon any Magikey monster or a level 4 or lower normal monster from your graveyard. So it's both an extender, so it continues your plays forward, and it is a recovery option to grab stuff out of the graveyard that we already used, such as Clavis or one of your other fusions, synchros, Xyz, rituals. So again, he's a key part of our engine clearly, so we're just going to start with 3 copies. Going down the list in order, next up is the level 8 Wind Fusion. So this is the Summon Dragon that's fusion summoned using a Magikey effect monster. So that'll either be the new Greater Magikey that we just added to the deck, or one of the other Ritual, Synchro, or Xyz monsters, and any non-token normal monster. So this one protects itself when it's summoned, and then you can use any the attribute of a normal monster in your or Magikey in your graveyard to destroy all monsters with the same attribute on your opponent's field. This is sort of like your bomb or your field wipe option, and it also gives you a draw if it was fusion summoned using 2 or more attributes. So while this is a good card in itself, I think we're all pretty aware that Effect by Destruction is not the strongest at this point. So let's just start by adding 1 copy of that. Moving down to list the second fusion is Magikey Summon Beast. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the last part of the name. This Summon Beast, when fusion summoned, adds 1 of their spells back from the graveyard, and then it also allows you to switch the battle position of an opponent's attack position monster, as long as you have the same attribute in your graveyard. As you can see, this archetype, in addition to summoning all types, summoning types, also has the ability to play with a lot of different attributes. Since this is our level 4 fusion, and it's easily summoned by doing a Magikey and a non-token normal, we'll just start with 2 of these, and then we'll work from there. Next up on our list, we switch colors over to the ritual monsters. So Magikey Cannon Garcevet is the big level 8 monster. It's an earth machine. If you haven't noticed yet, all of the major monsters have different attributes, so this is the earth one. Whenever first it gains attack equal to the number of attributes in your graveyard, so if you have all 6 attributes, it will pretty much be at 3,800 attack power, but it might be lower than that at any given point. This is our negation or disruption option. So whenever they activate an effective monster with the same attribute as a monster in your graveyard, you can negate the activation and destroy it. Additionally, whenever this ritual summon monster was sent to the grave, you can tutor another Magikey monster. So this is the first of many abilities in this archetype to tutor, or add a card from the deck to the hand. So there's a lot of potential here to continue your plays even if this boss monster gets eliminated. At this point, we'll start with 1 or 2 copies, and then as I said before, we may whittle that down as we go on. The next ritual on our list is Magikey Blaster. Now this was the monster that was first debuted when the set was first revealed, but it offers a lot of potential on its own as well. So whenever it's ritual summoned, it tutors any Magikey card. So that's awesome for as soon as you ritual summon it, you get another Magikey to continue your plays further, such as our greater Magikey to perhaps even reborn back the material you used to ritual summon this. Additionally, whenever this monster battles, whenever the attack is declared, and the opponent's monster has the same attribute as Magikey or normal in your grave, you can basically reload any number of cards from your hand to negate that opponent's monster's effect and then draw cards equal to the amount you returned. This lets you reshuffle your hand if you get a little bit of a rough spot, but odds and odds, I don't think we'll be triggering this second effect anytime too soon. That said, given the potency of the first effect, let's throw 3 copies in just to start, and then we'll work from there. Continuing down our list, we have our Magikey Mutated Ogre. So this was a newly revealed level 8 Thunder Fire Synchro, and this one adopts a couple of really powerful effects for today's build. First, it attacks on 2 monsters during each battle phase. Secondly, whenever it was synchro summoned using 2 or more attributes, you get to tutor any Magikey spell or trap directly from your deck into your spell or trap card zone. So this is awesome for searching out your additional support cards. Then lastly, if your opponent normal or special summons a monster with the same attribute, you can destroy it. So this is another great disruption option. So if you already start to see a theme here, both this level 8 and the level 8 ritual, the Magikey Cannon, are both great at disrupting your opponent's field through destruction. So we're going to play off this theme a little bit more as time goes on, but let's definitely just add 2 copies of this and keep going through. Finally, the last Magikey monster is Magikey Possessed Spirit. This is our final one in the attribute cycle, so this is water. And it searches a level 4 or higher normal monster from either your deck or graveyard whenever it's Xyz summoned. And then additionally, if it has a normal monster as an Xyz material, it gains the effect that it can send an opponent's monster at battles to the graveyard if it has the same attribute as a normal monster Magikey. Compared to the other effects here, while it doesn't destroy, this is probably the weakest of the attribute effects of the Magikey monsters. So for that reason alone, I'm just going to add 1. But it can be helpful in extending your plays if you really do need a normal monster for any given reason. So now that we've gone through the monsters, we haven't filled up our deck too much yet, but we'll definitely have some room to explore. So let's start going through the spells and traps, and I'm actually going to start with the field spell here, because for most themes, especially in the current modern game, the field spell really is the starting block for a lot of your plays. So for Magikey Unsealing, whenever it's first activated, you get to add a Magikey monster from your deck to hand. So that means it immediately tutors something else, so either your Creative Magikey or your Clavis or any of your ritual monsters. Then, the first time each non-token normal monster you control will be destroyed, it's not. It doesn't look like this theme sits on non-effect monsters, such as something like Tenyi, so this is not as important of an effect, but it's still relevant. And then finally, the last effect is that during your main phase, you can add Magikey Maptia from your deck to your hand. Then you just place 1 card from your hand back in the bottom of your deck, so as a replacement. So this searches both a Magikey monster and an important spell for the deck. So obviously we're going to throw three of this right in, and we'll probably even add a terraforming in down the road. Speaking of this Magikey Maptea, let's check out this spell next. So this is a hybrid option to either fusion or ritual summon. So it's a cool, nifty normal spell card. And if you control a normal monster, you can actually use another normal monster from your deck as part of the requirements for the summon. So if you're ritual summoning, for example, Magikey Blaster, who is a level 4, if you control Clavis, you can just send another Clavis from your deck to the graveyard to ritual summon him. You still keep your Clavis on board, you get your level 4 ritual, and then you already have a board that then searches another Magikey card. So this whole deck will sort of extend past that first normal that you summon, and then from there, everything else will fall into place. Another important thing to note that I just glossed over when we were introducing some of these monsters is that both the level 4 ritual and the level 4 fusion are both tuner monsters. Same with Greater Magikey. So you have plenty of tuners at your disposal in order to access that level 8 synchro that really the deck will use as a major force. The last spell card that we have to hit is also from the newest batch of support for Magikeys, and that's Magikey Battle. So first it shuffles back a normal monster, a Magikey monster, or a Maptea from your graveyard back into the deck. But since it's a quick play spell, if you activate it in reaction to an opponent's effect, your non-token normal monsters and your Magikey monsters are unaffected by that effect. This offers a little bit of protection. Overall, it's not super strong, and it doesn't advance your gameplay, so it doesn't tutor something else. It doesn't help you extend your plays further. So at best, this is a one of. If it had a stronger protection effect, maybe you consider it more as a preventative measure, so you can just pop it to protect for the whole entire turn. But without that, it's really not that worthwhile. So we're just going to leave one in here for that reason. And that brings us to the trap cards now. We'll start with Magikey Lock, which is fun because this is one of the 2 recovery options available to the theme. So this first one tributes a Magikey monster and non-token normal, and then you get to add up to 2 normal monsters or Magikey monsters whose total levels equal 8 or less. So you can add 2 4s, you can add 1 level 8 monster, the choice is yours, but after you special summon them in defense position, then you can either immediately synchro summon using those monsters, or any other monsters you control, or you can immediately Xyz summon. So this trap lets you make either the water or the fire during your opponent's turn. While it does come at the high cost of a tribute, you do have to remember that this can be easily tutored out by the fire synchro itself, so that can sort of offset that negative loss in card advantage. So for that reason alone, I'm just going to include 1 copy for right now, but we could include more if you are thinking about it as the first pass through. Next up on the list is the recovery option, but for the other 2 types of summoning, so fusion and rituals. So this one targets a normal or Magikey in your graveyard. It then gets added to your hand, and then you can either fusion summon or ritual summon using monsters from your hand or field. This one is a lot more potent because you're not going to be ending your field as much on either the fusion or the rituals. Instead, you're really going to be ending your turn on that synchro monster. So having connected Magikey lets you get into the other summoning types more easily during your opponent's turn if you do have to disrupt something that they're trying to do. For that reason, and for its like omni recovery without a cost of tributing anything, I'm adding 3 copies of this just off the bat. But as always, we can adjust this later. Finally, they have 1 more trap card, and that's their counter trap. So Magikey Lock Unlock lets you negate the activation of a spell or trap while you control a Magikey ritual or a Magikey special summon from the extra deck, and you get to negate that activation. Additionally, you also can declare 1 attribute, and then similar to True Kings of All Calamities, if you remember that card, all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls become that attribute until the end of the turn. While it doesn't do that for everything else it summons later, it does sort of lock that in for the monsters already on the field. So something like Magikey Cannon becomes much more potent when all of your opponent's monsters can be dark, when you know for sure that they will be an attribute of a monster in your graveyard, which dark is Clavis, so that's why I went with that example. So for lock on lock, we'll throw 3 copies in. Even though spell and trap card negation is not the most important thing in the world, it's definitely a great first step. So now that we've gotten through the whole archetype, and we've gotten through and added the cards that are important, let's next try to find some cards that synergize well with the playstyle, so the overall goals of the deck. So the first thing I think of is trying to look for how do we support the ritual, fusion, synchro, exes aspect of the deck. And the first thing I think of is let's cover each one at a time. So how do we support this ritual side? So looking at ritual spells, we already have the one in theme 1, but there's another option. There are 2 other options that are very generic and work with non-effect monsters. And those are the 2 ritual art spells cards. Refined Ritual Art and Advanced Ritual Art. Advanced Ritual Art, ritual summons a ritual monster from your hand, sending normal monsters from your deck. On the other hand, Refined Ritual Art special summons the ritual from your deck by tributing normal monsters from your hand. Since we have so much recovery for non-effect monsters, such as through Connected Magikey or through all the search power we have, it's actually probably more realistic to run Refined Ritual Art, as you're going to be a lot more consistently able to trigger that, because you don't need to have the ritual in your hand already. So if we employ this as an alternative ritual summoning card, we actually don't need to run as many copies of either rituals. So by including this, let's just drop 1 of each of those, so we still have the cannon as an option, and we still have 2 of the Magikey Blaster, but we don't need to be running 3 of each anymore. On the other hand, we just added a ritual spell that can't really be searched out by anything else in our deck. And since we have the extra normal summon from Greater Magikey, we can actually look to add one of the ritual tutors. So the ritual tutors that all tutor on normal summon are Senju of the 10,000 hands, Manju of the 10,000 hands, and Sonic Bird. Senju adds a ritual monster, Manju adds either, and that's why we're going with them, and then Sonic Birds adds a ritual spell. Since we want the versatility of being able to add either one of the rituals if we have a Maptea, or the Refined Ritual Art if we have a normal monster in hand, we'll go with Manju. And again, this doesn't hurt our normal summons, and we always want to be mindful of that when building a deck. But since we have that extra normal summon from Maptea, from the Greater Magikey, we don't really need to worry about that restriction when deck building. So we've covered the ritual aspect. I think we have plenty of cards here on that side. So let's just support the non-effect side of the deck. So right now we just have 3 copies of Clavis. But since we care about Magikey Monster, the attributes of Magikeys or non-effects, it's actually important to start looking at what other non-effect monsters can we add to the deck that are normal monsters, but just to diversify the amount of attributes that we have at our disposal. Since everything in this deck runs around level 4, I'll just start by filtering on level 4 normal monsters, and you'll see that we have a ton of options. All different types, all different attributes, especially the top end of the attack values, so that way we can at least rely on the normal monster to be a beat stick if we need to. Looking at the deck, and if we just sort it real quick, we can see that we have light and dark covered by Clavis and Maptea. We have another light in Manju. But getting to the other attributes is a little bit more difficult. You have Cannon, which is an earth, and the only other main decked attribute we have right now. We have the Exes that's a water, we have a fire, and a wind that are all sort of our boss monsters we want to go to at the end of our plays. We don't necessarily want to make in transition. So let's hone in on those attributes right now, just so we can support all the different summoning types. So first, let's focus on water. So if we want to filter on a water monster that is a normal monster, the best choice here is Megalo Smasher X, It has 2000 attack, it's a water monster, and it's a non-effect. And we don't need more copies than one because we can send it to the graveyard with Maptea. We can send it to the graveyard with Refined Ritual Art, so we have plenty of ways to get that non-effect monster to the grave. We just want to have the options available so we can expand that attribute pool in our graveyard. So then the other two types we have to care about are either wind or fire. But I don't want to add too many non-effect monsters. So right now, let's just start. Sorry, we also have to care about earth. We care about earth, fire, and wind. As I talked about earlier, this fire monster is going to be the primary summon that you have because it does tutor that spell of trap. So since we're going to be so reliably summoning it, let's just assume that we will be able to easily get that fire monster into the graveyard. Fire is also not that common of an attribute for other people to use, so it's not as important to have it in his graveyard at all times. There aren't really that many fire decks or fire standalone monsters that are all that worrisome at this given point in time. So instead, I care more about both earth and wind. So for the meantime, let's just throw one earth and one wind monster in, and we'll reevaluate later. So at this point, I just picked Leotron and Phantom Griffin. Again, they both have 2000 attack, they're level 4, and they're the attributes we need. So we've covered the physical normal monsters of the deck, but what about other normal monster support cards? If you just type normal monster into the search just to see what description they have, there's plenty of cards that support normal monsters. But I think we have enough monsters at this point, so let's just focus specifically on the spell cards. So what spells can help us? And the first one I immediately thought of before searching was Unexpected Die. So since Unexpected Die tutors any level 4 or lower normal from the deck, you can use this to summon your Clavis, and then off the bat you have everything ready for a Maptea summon. You can reveal Greater Magikey Maptea to start getting started. You have the world becomes your oyster if you start with Unexpected Die, and it's a very important card whenever you're running non-effect monsters in your deck, especially level 4 or lower. The other option I've been considering a little bit, especially since we added Refined Ritual Art, was a way to get normal monsters back to the hand. So to make this ritual spell be a little bit more reliable in summoning a ritual monster that you need. And the only other card that I can think of off the top of my head is Dark Factory of Mass Production. Now this might be a little bit of an older card, but it just recovers 2 normal monsters from your graveyard. Unlike many recovery spells, which you don't want to go too heavy-handed on, Factory is actually pretty reliable at 3 copies here, simply because you have so many ways of sending normal monsters to your graveyard that you're almost guaranteed to have them there, ready to be recovered back. So now that we've gone through that as non-effect support, let's open it up further. So beyond just looking at normal monsters, let's look at non-effect monsters. Now, Tenyi was one of the first archetypes to really coin and focus on this, as if you control no effect monsters, they can special summon themselves from the hand, and then all the main deck monsters have an ability to banish it from the hand or graveyard while you control that non-effect monster. But there's also been a lot of other just generic support that's come out. Anything from Daigusto Emerald, who we have back and who can recover one of our normal monsters, so we'll just throw them in while we're walking through. You can look at White Elephant's Gift, which sends a non-effect monster to the graveyard to draw 2. This combos well if you get multiple copies of Unexpected Die, or if you're going to have that Clavis sitting around to use. This is an options. We'll just throw in the side deck for now. Other options to consider is the new Supernatural Danger Zone. So this, whenever a non-effect monster is special summoned, you can destroy a card. This synergizes well with our destruction potential. But on the flip side, we don't really have a good way to summon non-effect monsters during the opponent's turn. So you can't make as most of this. So unlike something like Dark Magician that can use this card really well, we're just going to relegate this to the side deck as well because we can't really use it. And then the traps don't really offer too much. Fists of the Unrivaled Tenyi, again, we're not going to be sitting on our normal monsters, we're going to be just using them for more summons. So we've gotten through the non-effect, we've gone through the normal monster side, we've supported the ritual summoning a little bit more. Now let's just support the rest of the game plan of the deck, and that's just what other power impact cards can we add to sort of round out. So we have a fusion monster that's below level 5, so immediate thing that I always think of is instant fusion. And since instant fusion treats it as a fusion summon as well, you can use Magikey Summon Beast effect whenever it's summoned off of instant fusion. Similarly, and we referred to this earlier, we're running a field spell that is so impactful to your overall game plan that it would just be stupid to not run a copy of Terraforming as well. So at this point we have 40 cards, but that doesn't mean that we're done deck building yet. This just means that we have a base, that we have something to start building from. So now the question quickly becomes, do we want to how can we optimize this further? What could we add to our deck to make it more useful? And the first thing that I thought of was more disruptions. So we have a lot of disruptions in the form of our boss monsters, such as the mutated ogre. You have a disruption in the form of cannon. You have a disruption in the form of unlock. But all those you can see coming, either they're a boss monster on the field, it's a counter trap you tutored from the deck that your opponent saw. You don't really have anything waiting in the wings, so any hand traps. So what I'm thinking in terms of hand traps is, let's grab some monsters that discard themselves from the hand, but that also are an attribute that we need in our deck. So if we look at the Ghost Girls, these are all the level 3 monsters with 0 attack, 1800 defense that all discard themselves. You have Ash Blossom as a go-to, Ghost Mourner and Moonlight Chill, Ogre and Snow Rabbit, Spooky Dogwood, you get the picture. So the 3 attributes we identified earlier were Earth, Water, and Wind as the ones that we need to expand upon our decks. Fire we decided was already taken care of, so I don't think we need to look at Ash here. But if we look at the Earth one, the Water one, the Wind one, the Wind will disrupt a monster effect, so something that right now only Cannon can do. We have the Water, which prevents against OTK decks, so it just lets you gain life points for each time your opponent summons monsters. It comes with the downside of you having your life points if they don't special summon after you activate its effect, but this is a good OTK deterrent. And then Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion is the Earth one that negates an effect that interacts with the graveyard. Looking at these 3, I think the most impactful against a lot of decks is actually Ghost Mourner Moonlight Chill. So I'm going to rely on this one as my main pick right now, so I'm just going to add 3 copies of this. So since we've added a wind monster in, we no longer need this Phantom Griffin, so we can get rid of that, and we have wind covered for our attributes. We could do the same thing with both Earth and the Water if we really wanted to go hand trap heavy, but since we rely on normal monsters for things like Refined Ritual Art, for Maptea, we're even running Unexpected Die and Dark Factory, I would be more comfortable leaving in more normal monsters than not, so at this point I'm going to try to stick to these 5. So now we sort of hit one of the deck building rules, which is we're over 40 cards. Now, let me just sort of shrink that paradigm quickly. It is completely fine to go over 40 cards, and it's actually better in a lot of scenarios. If a card would be better than just a blank, it's worth having that extra card in. But that said, I think we've been fairly unoptimized by just adding things at random and just adding as many copies as we can while building. So we can definitely look to shrink some of the numbers of cards. So for things that are super highly searchable, so I'm looking at these Magikey spells and traps, we could probably drop those down a little bit. So we can drop the connected Magikey by 1, since we can already tutor it with Mutated Ogre. And similarly, Maptea, while it's a strong initiator, we do have an alternative ritual spell at our disposal, and the field spell already searches it. So between that access, we can drop those down to get down to 40 cards, and we'll have overall more consistent deck at having those disruptions at the ready to interact with the opponent. So with this, we have a pretty core baseline number of cards, available cards in our deck. Now we just gotta finish rounding out the extra deck. So as I said before, this deck all revolves around level 4s. So 4 plus 4 equals 8. So let's limit the synchros. Let's start looking at synchros, but synchros that are level 8. One of the ones that I immediately think of is, since we're playing around with so many attributes and we're going to have attributes in the graveyard, that would be Adamancipator Risen Dragite, who just needs a water in the graveyard in order to negate a spell or trap card. Similarly, we can also use Chaos Ruler because we do have light and darks at our disposal to banish from the graveyard, and it also helps us fill our graveyard with all the different attributes in order to have all of our Magikey effects being live. And then lastly, on the level 8 side, I personally almost never build a synchro deck that can make level 8 without including Draco Berserker. This is just such a strong card at ending duels, especially if the opponent leaves a couple monsters in attack position. But it also does have that disruption of banishing an opponent's effect monster that activates its effect. So once we have these down, we can look through the list pretty quickly, see if there's anything else we want to include. Maybe an Omega, so I'll throw it in here for now, and we'll see if that sticks. But there doesn't seem to be anything else that's really jumping out to me in terms of a must-have in the deck. So with that, I think we covered a lot of what we need to get. So let's clear this out again and look at what else we need to add, and that's Link Monsters. So we have a bunch of Synchros, Fusions. Why not throw the last summoning type in there as well? And the first thing I think of is, since we have so many different colors and types of cards, I immediately think of Cross Sheet. Since if you can trigger its fusion effect multiple times to keep recovering monsters from your graveyard, or if you can trigger its ritual one to just draw and discard, that's really helpful at deck thinning, and overall just will help advance your game plan. So let's add 2 copies of that in. And then, since we're running non-effect monsters, Link Spider is a shoo-in. It can help unclog your hand if you get multiple of normal monsters. If you just need to get another one on the board, it combines pretty well also going to Cross Sheet to just get stuff out of your hand and start moving towards a board. So that's the reason why I'm including that one in here. So we have 1 slot left in the deck, in the extra deck. And while you could fill this with a lot of different things, with the sheer access of like the 4 and 8, I'm thinking that we should also include a Geomath mech, just to sort of cap it off and create a monster and add a monster that is that strong wall that your opponent will have to get over, since it is unaffected by opponent's effects while it's in the extra monster zone. So by throwing that in, this rounds out our extra deck and is a great first draft. So that's the whole point here, is to try to build a deck as a first draft, test it out a little bit, and then iterate it on it from there. So with that, I'll save the deck as is, and now it's time to play test it a couple times. So this is the process that I go through when I'm building a new deck for the first time. Most of the articles that I put out, or the profiles that I put out, I start out with a copy like this. I start test dueling, I start improving it, and then the final version you see is often very different than what I originally start with. And that's the case that I want to drive home for all of you as well. You can definitely iterate on decks. You don't have to stick with just the single build that you see that I post or that anyone else posts. Try to test it out for yourself, see what you like, see what you don't like, and then from there you can start editing it slightly to sort of shift it more into what you're looking for out of the build. Look at a couple more tech options if you can think of anything new, and really work from there. So with that, I'll cut out of talking through how I built this deck, and let's show off some duels actually using this in action.